Well, good morning. We're going to continue today with our study of the book of Proverbs. And as we get started, though, I want to ask you a question. Have you ever wanted something so bad you can taste it, or visualize it, or just feel it? Like maybe you could just taste that steak from that perfect steakhouse, or maybe it's that car. You can just visualize it. Maybe it's that vacation. You can just see yourself laying on the beach or sitting in that boat. Man, sometimes we just want stuff so bad, which is all we can think about. Sometimes that can just kind of be a fun exercise. Sometimes, though, that can be troublesome. Sometimes things we want to excess, can be really troublesome for us here and us here, and can lead to some bad decisions in our life. So today we're going to continue our study, and we're going to look at some different verses today from some different places and talk about living in excess and how that really cannot be good for us. So we're going to begin in Proverbs chapter 23. And I'm going to read us a couple verses and we're going to get started, all right? Verses 17 through 18, chapter 23. Do not let your heart envy sinners. Instead, always fear the Lord, for then you will have a future and your hope will not be dashed. Solomon begins here with a promise. He promises us a future and a hope, but we have to maintain our focus. And our focus has to be that same theme we've seen throughout the book of Proverbs, and that is fear of the Lord. Being content in the Lord is the antidote to jealousy, the antidote to envy. Sometimes we envy and we're jealous of other people. Sometimes we're jealous of the stuff they have. Sometimes we're jealous of the fun they get to have. Sometimes we're even jealous of the family they have. And Solomon says we can't let envy be our focus. The issue is not their stuff. The issue is not their fun. The issue is not having things. The issue lies in us and our heart and how we interact with and how we long for, sometimes in a bad way, the things that other people have, the things that other people get to do. The age of social media makes this extremely difficult. I mean, no one posts their bad vacation on social media, usually. No one usually boasts about their ratty old car. They're posting that brand new one that they just picked up from the car lot. Very few people are boasting about the bad things in our life online. Therefore, all we see is the good stuff, and therefore we think, oh, they've got it made. They've got everything. They never have a bad day. And we get jealous of that because we know that bad days happen. We know that bad things happen in my life. Obviously, it never happens in their life because they never post anything bad. We need to remember that people want us to see the good stuff in their life. And people never show us the bad stuff. So when we're envious of them, we need to keep a focus. Remember that we are to fear the Lord and that we're to see reality through His eyes. And so Solomon begins with this promise. And I don't want us to lose sight of that as we dive into this a little further. He begins with this promise of a future hope and a reward that the Lord offers us. But he's going to dive in. He's going to give us a petition. He's going to plead with us and ask us to keep our eyes on the right things. So let's keep trucking in Proverbs chapter 23, verses 19 and 21. Listen, my son, and be wise. Keep your mind on the right course. Don't associate with those who drink too much wine or with those who gorge themselves on meat. For the drunkard and the glutton will become poor, and grogginess will clothe them in rags. Before we dig into these verses, I want to ask you to stop for a second and think about a few things. Think about a time where you wanted something really badly and it led to a bad outcome. This doesn't have to be something serious. It can actually be something kind of silly if you want. And maybe you had too much ice cream. You remember this one time you ate way too much ice cream and it wasn't good for you. Or maybe that one time where you went to the Brazilian steakhouse and they just kept bringing out the food and it just led to a bad thing. But maybe think about even some times where you made some mistakes, where you really desired something that wasn't good for you or it was just over the top. I want you to just think about what that did to you, maybe in the short term, maybe in the long term, the effects of your just over desire for something. Again, it could be silly, it could be something very serious. But I want you to take a moment and just think about that. And we're going to come back and we're going to talk about this portrait of a man who desired too much. Okay, I hope you thought of some things, a time when maybe you just went overboard with your excess. And again, if you thought something silly, I hope it was kind of a fun remembrance of just a time where you just kind of maybe overdid something a little fun. But also, I encourage you to really think back on those times where maybe you made a mistake and you had to live with the consequences. And that's what Solomon is talking about here in these verses. He paints a portrait through 6 questions. And again, he ties it back to the person who's consumed too much drink. But I think we can take a look at that example and then we can expand that out to look at other areas of excess. Let's look at these questions. Who has woe? Who has sorrow? Who has conflicts? Who has wounds he can't remember? Wounds he doesn't know the reason for? And who has red eyes? If you spend the weekend painting the town red, and you wake up on Monday morning with these questions, and I think you know the answer. Who is that person? That person may have been you. That person may have been a person who made a mistake over the weekend by chasing too much fun in not good ways. Verse 31 tells us, don't long for 5 o'clock somewhere, because it might start off fun, but it's going to lead to some bad places if we take things to excess. And that's what Solomon is challenging us with here. And again, he gives us this example, but how does this apply to other areas of our life? How does this apply to excess in other areas? Well, think about those words: woe, sorrow, conflict, wounds. All those can come about when we desire more and more and more of things. Think about financial excess. Maybe you want more and more and more money, or maybe you just spend more and more and more money that maybe you don't have. That's going to lead to the woe that comes from debt. It's going to lead to the woe that comes from cooking the books and getting found out. Think about the drugs and opioid crisis that we're suffering in America. Think about the sorrow of the family of facing your kids or facing relatives when maybe we go overboard in those areas. Think about our marital relations and excess outside of those proper relationships. That's going to lead to conflict, and we're going to look up one day and say, where did all this conflict come from? And you can trace it back to a poor decision in your relationships. And that's what Solomon is really challenging us with. He says, stay on the path. Don't go into excess. Be wise with your desires. Don't envy other people's things and other people's life. All of these and the other areas of excess will lead to injuries and pain. And yes, Solomon's talking about this one thing, but the envy of verse 17 can lead to excess in a lot of areas. And the portrait he paints can be true of many people, and it can be painted in many kinds of colors and with many kinds of oils, not just one of drunkenness and excess in eating. So let's keep trucking and let's look at the real problem that we have here. Solomon's going to wrap this up with painting us a picture of a problem. So look at verses 33 through 35. Your eyes will see strange things, and you will say absurd things. You'll be like someone sleeping out at sea or lying down on the top of a ship's mast. They struck me, but I do not feel pain. They beat me, but I don't know it. When will I wake up? I'll look for another drink. Solomon begins to show us the problem of walking down the path of excess. He continues with this picture of a person who's consumed with drugs or alcohol, and he wants to paint us a picture of a life, maybe a life that you've seen personally, maybe in your family or maybe in yourself, and surely we've all seen it on TV. It's a person who in a stupor says and sees weird things, says and sees dumb things, a person whose sleep is wind-tossed, like sleeping on the top of a mast in a ship that's rocking about. It's a sleep that's troubled. A person so out of it, he doesn't feel the pain of getting beat up or the pain of the life that he is living. This person consumed with addictions This person consumed with wanting more and obtaining things that aren't his to have. This person who wants, but what does he do? He's troubled in his sleep. He's troubled in his waking. And he says, as soon as I wake up, what am I going to do? I'm going to go right back at it. I'm going to start this path again. You see, go back to our beginning. Fear of the Lord and walking down his path. If we get stuck on the wrong path, it's going to be extremely difficult to get off of that path and get back to doing the things that God has us to do. So my challenge for us this week is be careful what we want. Yes, be careful what we desire to put in us, but be careful also desire what our eyes see and what we see around us and the things that we desire. Do we really need that new thing? Do we really need more and more of this and that? And Solomon says, be careful what you wish for, because it might turn into envy, and we can't have that. We need to focus on the remedy, which is the path that God has for us and the reward that he has promised us if we continue down the wise path. So hope you this week, I hope you're able to follow after the Lord and seek after his things, and hope to join you next week as we continue in the book of Proverbs.